what's the best location for all these 20 things on the grid. And we've been doing this for 10 years and had consultant after consultant. I'm exaggerating.
No, right, yeah.
But not much. And every single one has led to the same conclusion, that the combining the nursing type as care and Sherburne Commons provides a continuum of care and an opportunity to go from one class to another, and it makes wonderful sense. But what happens is the people who have, my sense, a close family interest and connection and have been there with Island Home with their loved ones and seen them pass on and all that, at the current location, just that's the only thing on their mind. And the rest of it is just gets in the way.
It's the old heart and head conflict.
Mm-hmm. It's just really too bad.
My wife was coming to someone talking against it because the old people like to go look at the harbor, and my wife's mother was there. She never looked at the harbor. She just couldn't.
I think Mass General's going through a certain thing too right now with the park they have outside, and they want to take the park and, of course, add on. And people that have had, whether it was going through cancer treatment with their kids and walked through the park and sat there, they're all same thing. They're all fighting it. Yeah.
But yet my mother-in-law's in there. She's been there for 2 years, and she looks out there and sees the water. She thinks she's on a cruise for the last 2 years.
And she feels good about that. But if she started out someplace else, she might feel good there too.
No,
So, anyway, so really,
It's hard.
The problem is, at some point we have to decide. We can't just sit here and wait forever and.
Anyway, so it's time. The meeting for March 24th of the Board of Health is now open. A quorum is present. This meeting will be televised and recorded. I don't see anyone in the audience, so we will not have public comment. We next have the minutes from last week. Has everyone read those?
Yes.
Any comments, additions, subtractions? Hearing none, those are approved by unanimous consent. We asked Roberto to show us the Duke's Road letter before we sent it out, and that is attached in here.
This is the standard decision letter that we have for the Board of Health for whenever there's a decision that affects property owners. We wanted to make sure that it said what the Board of Health wanted to say.
So this letter is a standard response to a variance request?
To variance requests,
things as well?
Yes, it's for variance requests, for votes on policy, things like that. This is a standard form letter that I developed. We used to not send anything out.
Well, just to go, it's pretty. I found it fine. It seems to me to be sort of direct and to the point, and it doesn't start with a flowery introduction. Which is, some responses to a request for a variance or a decision. Sometimes you say, well, we appreciate hearing from the people impacted by the question posed, and we've considered these facts, and we think under the circumstances, thus and so is appropriate. But I guess that's implied by you say a hearing was held.
Yes, but I'd be happy to add anything that the board wishes.
I'm not sure we should. I'm just sort of sharing some thoughts.
This is direct. And this
Direct,
is what
very official.
Yeah.
I just have a question. Have we found out if the existing sewer line is what it's supposed to be in size and length? And if we add on, tell all these people they have to tie into this thing, are we sure that it's going to sustain all these other people in the line?
The information that I have received from what I've spoken with the engineer, the answer is yes. But I know the town has gone through a way to review the sewer line. According to the town engineer and the DPW director, they have reviewed it and it does meet the standards. But personally, I haven't seen the plans, and I know the plans have been requested for
The only
a
reason
public
is,
review.
I mean, this is gonna be a tough sell anyway, with these
Mhm.
people getting in there. If they all start tying it in, and there's problems, we're gonna hear about it.
Absolutely.
All I can respond is somewhat along the lines Roberto did. I've asked for I presume there would be some written specifications developed by the town that the developer had to abide by. I've asked for that. I don't have it. I've never seen it. So to my knowledge, all the communications, to the extent they exist, were verbal. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah. I know in speaking to the town engineer and DPW director today, they are working on compiling something for a public hearing of some sort, maybe at a Board of Selectmen's meeting. I haven't heard any communications regarding about what the next steps on, but
But usually when they put a line in, it's before they cover it up and everything, the
Mhm.
DPW has to sign off and everything.
and to my knowledge, that did happen.
So they have that paperwork and everything?
They should, yes.
They should, I know, but
Yeah,
we
to my-
make sure that someone does have
Yeah.
that paperwork.
To my knowledge, they do, and it has been reviewed, and they do have it. I just
Okay.
haven't seen it.
Okay, fine.
And how is this being mailed out?
Um,
Certified
What I want to do is actually mail these out to the local addresses via regular mail, and then to the addresses on file with the tax collector via certified mail, so that we hit both addresses correctly, which is one of the complaints that they had regarding communications, that some letters were sent to the wrong addresses. So I want to send this to both to make sure that we capture everyone.
Okay. There's still there's an uneasy feeling on this board about that line.
Hmm.
You can
It's
feel it.
it's a fair assumption, and I haven't seen the design plans myself, and at the same time, I'm also not a fluids engineer, so even if I did see the line, I can't provide a professional opinion on it.
I mean, can we put some kind of writing in that letter that you're sending out that says maybe not providing the sewer line is adequate for the people to tie in it some way? I mean, I just don't want this thing to come back and bite us.
In the long run,
Because we will be under a lot of pressure if something happens and all those people have spent that money to get in that line, they'll be at our throats.
absolutely. In the long run, if the line fails in any way, the town has already taken it. So it is the onus is on us to repair it and to make it to specifications if it fails.
It's true of any line.
That's true with any line the town has taken,
It all would come back to the town.
no matter what, because we have already taken that line.
Okay.
Okay. All right, next is, I wanted to discuss these two bylaws. Now, I have some questions, we can review it, and we can make a decision not to have an opinion on these bylaws, or we can see if we want to add amendments, or whatever you wish. And if no action is taken at the town meeting, I'll just sit quietly. But if we think we need to address it, I need a sense of the board. Now, in my view, there's some conflict between these two, although the letter from the town attorney says there isn't a conflict between the two, although I'm just a simple physician, and I don't quite understand it. And by state statute, we are responsible for overseeing agricultural activities, including nuisance. And remember, one point a few months ago, we deputized the police force to deal with nuisance requirements at farms and animals. But that was based on a state law, correct?
Yes, it is defined in the state law.
So I have one question. Would a state law supersede this regulation?
Yes. State law, we still have to respond to any nuisance. I actually did ask for a clarification that I got this morning, which is what I'm trying to look for right now. I didn't have time to to get it printed out and sent out to everyone. I did say that though there's no direct conflict between the two articles, it still falls on us to do the enforcement. And by passing of the articles of Article 65, which is the right to farm bylaw, it now puts the burden of proof on us to prove that they are working outside of commercial best practices in order to prove any sort of nuisance, unless there is an immediate danger as
Right.
written
They
by
could make all the noise they want to,
as
long as it's a commercial state.
as long as it's a commercial state and it meets best practices
And-
in
and
quotations.
then- But the other bylaw, 6070,
So, mhm.
the town council said it applied to personal animals. However,
Mhm.
that's not in the, it just says Nantucket. It doesn't say personal animals, yes? That's where I'm having the trouble with the legal.
Exactly. The town attorney took into consideration in Article 70 that if adopted, this will affect personal animals because that is the intent, but it's not written that way.
It's not,
And intent is sideways to what the legal definition is sidelined in comparison to the legal definition. We could use it's not a stretch of any way to use Article 70 to enforce on Article 65.
yeah.
And at the same time, it is not a stretch at all to use Article 65 to protect themselves from Article 70.
Right.
So when I asked for that clarification, the response that I received from town council was that is an internal policy discussion. That is not a legal. That's what I'm trying to find here so that I can explain.
Well, it makes it impossible for us. I mean, we, by state law and our responsibility, we are responsible for enforcing noise in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes it impossible for us to do that. And the other thing that I'm concerned about 65 is in the last paragraph, it says if there are grievances, the grievances come to the Ag Commission.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I mean, and that's like giving up our authority.
Exactly. So I just recently found it, and what I'm trying to what they did explain is that if the BOH finds that a public health risk is there and we can act immediately and we don't need to go through the Agricultural Commission. So we can take unilateral action in event if we find public health risks. So things, what he defined as a public health risk could be things like if they're spreading too much fertilizer in the wellhead district, if there are too many animals in the wellhead district and and there's no proper control of the feces, things that in the nuisance definition defines as miasmas, so the smells and bad smells into the other areas we can define as a public health issue as well. We can take action under the state nuisance law. However, it depends on on town policy, which I feel if both of these articles are passed, town policy will eventually end up having to be settled by the Board of Selectmen, mainly because we can take action and then the Agricultural Commission can say we didn't consult them. So there is a policy. It does add a bureaucratic step in our enforcement. So and here he does explain to me, and I'll read out a section here where from town council it specifically says that it is true that the burden would be on the town to demonstrate that a farm is not using normal operations. And as a practical matter, if the town believes that they're operating out of no normal operations, it would be likely for some action involving a public health concern. So therefore, the Board of Health could get involved. In town council's opinion, the Section 5 procedure regarding involving Agricultural Commission is geared towards issues that at least appear to involve normal farming operations, which the bylaw is supposed to protect, and where there would be no need for more serious or immediate enforcement. So, what I take from that is the Board of Health can take actions for Board of Health nuisances and for Board of Health issues because the state law supersedes any town article. So we can still enforce. However, it would be more of a public relations issue and policy issue if the Ag Commission feels that we are superseding them, you taking unilateral action without involving them.
This is giving them authority.
This is giving them authority, exactly. Internal authority.
In fairness to them, the Ag Commission is people who are mostly farmers.
Correct. And there's nothing in here that, and in this discussion, there's no suggestion that the Ag Commission is incompetent in any way. They know what they're doing. They know how to enforce. They know the policies. They know the procedures. And it's a well thought out article. The only issue that we see as a department as well is adding this step in enforcement, where meanwhile it kind of takes away, it more or less takes away the rights of the abutters. If somebody were to declare their property, there's no minimum size requirement for what a commercial farm on Nantucket would be.
It's just a dollar sales definition.
It's just the dollar sales definition, which is the $500. So if a person has, as has been seen on the island before, 100 to 200 goats or sheep,
Declare it's a farm.
they can declare themselves as a farm.
Franzuto, doesn't he?
Mm.
The goat guy?
Yeah.
Does he still do cheese?
Yeah, I don't.
It's declared
I thought it
I'm
had
sort of
Mhm.
kidding, but you know.
Yeah,
and the abutter,
exactly.
And the abutter could not complain about the noise.
As if they're declaring, and that's the problem. That's where the issue falls in.
I thought in order to be declared a farm, you had to have a minimum of 5 acres.
That I don't.
You know,
That is a zoning
all the
question.
Discussions. I heard some of the
Okay.
discussions at the finance committee, just a few, Jim, and a dollar amount. Now, I don't recall whether there was a size. You know, Kutzma spoke at Meet the Articles. I was just trying to recall whether he said there was like a 2 acre. Do you remember something like that?
So I don't remember, but I am getting a.
What I heard was it was coming from someone. I said to someone that had some animals on the thing. Well, you're taxed as a farm. He said, no, you're not considered a farm on Nantucket unless you have a minimum of 5 acres.
Okay.
Now I don't know if that's gospel.
Regardless of what the size is, they would need to meet the definition of a commercial farm before they would be protected under Article 65, whether that's 2 acres, 5 acres, or 50. Regardless of that, they would still need to be declared and have official taxation for taxation purposes and use purposes as a farm. So that's the only way they would be protected by Article 65.
Just a small point, but I understand there are differences between the articles submitted by Dylan Wallace, I think is the proponent, and the recommendation of the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee made some changes. I called Kelly before we came here just to ask him, and because you can't tell from the warrant which changes they made. So he didn't feel thought they were helpful changes, whatever that means, based on some of the discussion points they had at the Finance Committee. But we didn't get far enough in our conversation so that I could report to you what those changes are. Because I asked him about the notification, which apparently every single real estate transaction, Jim, you'd be interested in this, not later than 21 days after the purchase, you had to send a notice that you're now purchasing property in a town that has a right to farm bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be, the implication is you might be next to something you ought to be alert to.
Right.
You've been put on notice, in effect. And so I didn't know if who was going to be responsible for this or whatever. But I gathered from Jim, they felt there was there had been some discussion amongst other parties, I don't know who they are, and that they have a method to accomplish this. And maybe there's already a disclosure that has a list of things, and this is one more addition, I don't know.
And the article explicitly describes 3 boards that can have jurisdiction over this other than the Ag Commission, which would be the Board of Selectmen, Zoning, and the Board of Health. It explicitly states the 3 in there, with the zoning enforcement officer being the main officer for everything not health related. However, it's usually the practice that whenever anything remotely connects to the nuisance law, it falls under the Board of Health. Roosters being a perfect example.
This is more complicated than I thought.
Well, I don't think the real estate people know anything about that.
Yeah, well, here, a copy of the disclosure notification, so it's been highlighted on our copy here.
I highlighted it.
Yeah, shall be given on a form, da-da-da-da-do, before the closing takes place, and filed with the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
Now, if that stayed in the Finance Committee's recommendation, which again might be changed, but if it is in there, that's what you gotta do.
It'd be nice to know the size of the property, because under this being agricultural, I mean, anybody could
No, I don't have it.
pop up a greenhouse,
You call himself a farm.
call himself a farm, and then you're exempt from taxes, and
That's the
as
whole
long
idea
as
of being a
right.
farm. Your tax rate is completely different than anybody else. It's way down.
See, that's interesting. Again, I didn't hear all the discussions. I don't recall the Finance Committee talking about taxes, but maybe they did. That's a good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to be taxed? So Bartlett Farms is taxed as agricultural.
Right.
So they get a rate of 27 cents, and we all pay $1 or
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely.
Is that true of anybody else under this bylaw?
Anyone who is
That's why
considered
I
a
got-
farm.
I had that conversation, and that's why that person said, no, you have to have a minimum of 5 acres. Now, he might have been wrong, it might not be exactly 5 acres, but I know there's a number in there to be considered a farm tax-wise.
Right. So there could be a different set of rules for the tax issue. This is a set of rules for something else.
Yeah.
And there might be another set for something else. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't have Andrew's phone number, so I can't get a.
Well, as far as the real estate thing, is if we're showing a piece of property and the guy said, I see some chickens over there, is that a farm? If we know it is, you automatically have to tell him. But if we don't know and he asks us the question, we have to find out.
Right. You're responsible to answer this
Absolutely,
question. But if
absolutely.
he doesn't ask,
If he doesn't ask, you don't have to say a word. But,
Right.
I mean, if I'm buying a house, I see 3 or 4 chickens next door, I'm asking.
right. But if, because the rooster thing came up because of Kelly Road like 15 years ago.
Right.
And I think the article didn't pass. But it was an important thing to those people,
But I think we do. I think finding out the size of the property is a big thing, because it affects the tax rate for that person.
If it affects the tax rate. I mean, right.
Well, it does.
So that's a good question.
It's a question. We're going to-
So I was just reading the State Department of Agricultural Resources. Local zoning bylaws define how large the minimum acreage for a farm would be. So it would be defined within the town of Nantucket. So I would have to ask Andrew or Leslie to get that exact number. But I will forward it to you before town meeting. I will get that answered.
So summarize again for me
Yes, sir.
the implication of these as written for the Board of Health and the Health Department
In a nutshell, if both are passed
as written.
as written, whenever we receive a complaint against a farm regarding any type of nuisance or the fertilizer regulation or any other public health issue, that is not an immediate public health issue, so something that can cause diseases or danger or harm, we would have to forward that grievance to the Agricultural Commission so that they can take it under advisement at their next meeting, deliberate it, come up with a recommendation, and either choose to mediate the issue or provide us with an enforcement recommendation.
And that comes about under this last paragraph.
In the very last paragraph, I did highlight it in there for you.
Well,
In 65.
Sorry, 65,
Yeah.
65, the last paragraph.
the more I think about it, there's advantages to that if it's mediated.
Yes.
Before it gets, we don't have to do
There's definite advantages
So
if the
it's our-
Agricultural Commission wants
It's
to
our
mediate.
advantage and your advantage if it gets mediated and taken
Mhm.
care of.
Exactly.
But it would come to us if it's not mediated. Or a complainer could come on their own.
Or a complainer could come on their own, exactly. If a complainer decides to contact us directly, depending on the nature of the complaint, we would have to tell them to get in contact with the Agricultural Commission, or we would forward it to the Agricultural Commission for their review.
But if you believe the nature is a matter of public health in any type of form,
Then we can take
you
action.
take it, right?
We can take action. So the end of definition of our immediate danger is where it gets hard. We would have to really provide, the burden of proof lies on us at that point to say this is an immediate danger because the nitrogen levels are at this much, or we've tested the feces of the animal and it has salmonella, or it now lies on us to prove
Or you
beyond
got a
that doubt.
puddle in your yard that hasn't
Mhm.
disappeared, now that's a mosquito problem.
Exactly. Well, we can use that. We can use that because that is well documented proof. But other issues for, I'm sure you've seen it in in a lot of the publications where for every publication that says this causes one thing, there will be a publication that says it causes another thing. There's all sorts of arguments that people can use by having this bylaw in there. Any complaint that would be filed against a farm is almost invincible.
It's invisible.
Invincible. The farm will be fully protected by this.
And the proponents have said, this doesn't replace, you're already subject to all those rules and regulations.
Farms are
It's
subject
just
to
sort of
pretty.
cream on the top of
Mhm.
the milk,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's a good thing.
Mhm.
It's like, it says we're good guys and we believe in farming. Because all those things you just talked
Mhm.
about, they would say already exist.
Farms are subject to some pretty strict regulations. I will give them that. Having had to enforce raw milk regulations before, they are subject to some pretty heavy regulation.
So in this system, if there was a complaint,
Mhm.
would you know about it?
Only if the complaint comes to us. If it goes straight to the Agricultural Commission, we wouldn't know about it. Only if they choose to tell
I would
us.
think at a minimum, you need to be copied on the complaint.
That'd be fair. That'd be definitely be a fair compromise.
I said at a minimum, he should be copied on a complaint.
Well, we should.
Hmm Yes,
Yeah,
as a board, absolutely. All of us as a board.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
my
Mhm.
fear is it was lost.
Exactly. I fully agree that would be a fair. That's definitely fair.
So on this, now, are there any, let's take one thing at a time. Are there any comments on this concept of the complaints being adjudicated through the Ag Commission before it comes here? Does anyone have any problem with that, with the caveat that Roberto knows about it?
Mhm.
As you said, I think that sounds like if they can resolve it, great. That means the grievant is satisfied.
Mhm.
So if you look at this last paragraph, you got to make sure it's the same in the recommendation, Roberto. But
Yes, sir.
you could add a clause in there. File a grievance with the select board, the zoning board, or, so this even says the grievant can choose one of three places to file.
Mhm.
And we could add something, or the Board of Health, or in And in each instance, a copy will be filed with the Board of
Yeah, I will
Health, or
ask,
something like that.
I'll ask, and as an amendment.
Yeah, that would need to be an amendment on the floor. Yes.
My question is, as far as this real estate thing, do these people have to be notified before this becomes law? Or is it up to them to find out?
According to Article 65, in theory, as a person is purchasing a home, they will be this disclosure that they're purchasing land next to a farm will be part of the packet. But anyone who's ever gone through the process of acquiring land knows that that packet is significant,
Okay.
and it'll easily be lost
It's
in
not
there.
next to a farm, I think it's any property in the town of Nantucket.
Yeah.
Oh,
To
any?
be clear.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's even that's even larger than I expected.
You know,
I missed
sometimes
that.
real estate agents aren't gonna, aren't gonna give information to people that they don't not necessarily have to give them.
It's yeah.
So what I'm saying is, somehow the real estate people in this town, if this is true, they're gonna have to be notified by the town or something that this is part of their deal.
Yeah.
Because if they're not notified and something like this happens, they're gonna say, "I never saw that. How am I supposed to know that?"
Okay.
So
There's
how do we get around? How do we do that?
there's always there's always a caveat with that because this is going to be put in as a bylaw on the Code of Nantucket. It is the same concept as the dog licenses, for example. You can't claim if you have a dog on Nantucket, you have to get it licensed. Well, there are many people who say, "I didn't know that," and the response from the enforcing authority always will be, can and always will be, ignorance of the law is no defense against it.
I know, but you don't know what people are like. If a real estate broker sells a piece of land to somebody, and all of a sudden he's in there for 3 months, and he finds out he's next to a farm, and all these things start happening. The first thing he'll do, he'll sue the real estate broker, then he'll sue the real estate company.
That's
And-
true.
And all I'm saying is, I would think the real estate people in this township would be more than glad to know this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's not something they want to find out the hard way.
Let's go back to, all right, so that's that part of the paragraph I was uncomfortable with, and you made me feel comfortable. Thinking about it, it actually helps us.
It helps a little bit, yes.
Now, what about our enforcement?
As far as enforcement goes, we are still, because we have the statutory authority to enforce all Board of Health regulations under Chapter 31, we can issue tickets and citations and fines to farms if we feel that the violation is enough to supersede this bylaw. That there is no explicit explanation as to what would supersede it written in the bylaw, so that is incumbent upon the inspector to use their best judgment as a professional.
So, if we gentleman over here, our famous hearing who was having trouble with a rooster next
Was
door.
that Mr. Odison?
It was 2 days
He
before
makes
my
a
first
complaint.
interview.
Can we tell the farmer to keep the rooster quiet?
We could under the nuisance bylaw,
Under the state bylaw.
under the state law.
So-
Yes.
All right, so this
Mhm.
this isn't as bad as I thought it was.
It's-
We
it's-
still have the authority of the state gives us
The state
supersedes
supersedes. Because the state nuisance law is a Massachusetts general law. This is a town bylaw.
So if we did this, or now the police, or our
Mhm.
agents, cited someone, they would probably give us some difficulty saying, well, we have Article 65. But the comeback is it doesn't matter because the state supersedes it.
Exactly. And I have already spoken with the chief of police about that, and he concurs.
Good. And so, but
Can I just ask a question? So the rooster noise example, which is the one most likely to get at us,
Mhm.
is not covered by best practices, or and so best practice is to keep your rooster quiet, apparently.
Exactly. There is more.
Well, if you read this, you have to excuse me, my computer died, and I had to read all of this on my iPhone and this.
Ouch.
There's a thing in here about it's going to be noisy all night long.
There's-
a sentence that really-
There is a sentence. Where is it that it
It's in,
says it?
section
Here it
3.
is, section 3. The above described agricultural activities may occur on holidays, weekdays, and weekends by night or by day, and shall include the attendant incidental noise, odors, dust, and fumes associated with normally accepted agricultural practices. It is hereby determined that whatever impact may be caused to others through the normal practice of agriculture is more than offset by the benefits of farming to the neighborhood, community, and society.
Is that in 65?
That is in 65, section 3.
We didn't highlight that in this. Is that because it's in the recommendation and not the text? Or
N-
we just-
No, it's not.
No, it's highlighted.
highlighted.
It's highlighted in section
Okay.
3.
Page 66.
I just want to make sure I got it right.
So it
Okay,
does say that
Okay, thank you.
in my opinion, professional opinion, incidental noise is different than nuisance noise. An incidental noise, in my opinion, for agricultural farm use is chickens clucking. It's the farm tractors running. It's the noise of the weed whacking and things like that. The nuisance noises are if somebody were to be running a chainsaw at midnight. That wouldn't be covered under
Or
this.
if the rooster's croaking all night.
Or if a rooster is croaking at 2 o'clock in the morning, that should not be considered an incidental
But it would have to be
noise.
consistently 2 o'clock.
It would have to be consistent,
If you did
exactly.
it once, it's not a big deal, but if there was one rooster that just liked to do it every day.
Exactly,
someone-
like on right around the corner right
We
here.
would have the authority to deal with that.
Yes,
And
we
they
would.
give us a hard time, but we.
And actually, Article 70 gives the police authority to respond to that as
see,
well.
That's what I didn't understand in the town council's letter, and again, I was reading it on my
Mhm.
iPhone. Uh, He talks about 70 as being personal animals or something. But it doesn't say that, it just says.
It doesn't specifically say that in the bylaw. The town council interpreted it as the intent being again for personal animal
I don't care
use,
what the intent is. It's written-
with, but it's
in English.
written as any.
It says any.
Yeah.
Any in the town.
It's written as any. So it does give the authority of the animal control officer to respond to nuisance animals under this bylaw and the state
And the
nuisance
state.
law.
So there'd be 2 bylaws against
hmm
65.
When the enforcement officer decides, if need be, to give a citation on that third offense, which is given out on Article 70, it explicitly says that on the third offense they'll get fined. So it has to be 3 times. When the enforcement officer decides to provide the fine, they can give the fine on both Article 70 as well as Chapter 122, Chapter 111, Section 122.
Double jeopardy.
It can be exactly.
Okay, so I'm a little more comfortable.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just didn't want us to lose.
No, and it's always good for
I just
this.
want to make sure we're taking care of our legal obligations.
And we are still given enforcement rights. It's some of it under best practices. If they decide to fight it, it can go to the Agricultural Commission to get for a opinion. But we are still allowed to enforce.
I go back into this real estate part, the 21-day thing
Mhm.
that you've got highlighted. It's kind of, it says, this disclosure notification is to inform buyers or occupants that the property they are about to acquire or occupy lies within a town where farming activities
Mhm.
occur, which doesn't necessarily mean it's next door.
Yeah, it's the entire island. Exactly.
So every
It's all
single real
islands.
estate
So
transaction-
every single piece of property the real estate broker sells,
We'll have to have
the
this
buy,
paper.
it's up to the owner of the property to give the real estate broker something saying that what? saying that it doesn't say that this property you're buying is next to a farm. It just says you're buying a piece of property that lies within the town
There
where
might
there
be-
is a farm.
Yeah, there might be a farm in the town, and if you want to know something more about it, you better go find out on your own.
Yeah, I mean, you might be buying a piece of land in Sconset, and there's a farm in Nantucket, but there's a farm somewhere else.
It's a disclosure, and it's good to know. Actually, it's good to have that information, regardless of whether it's a farm in Madigan you're buying in Sconset. I actually personally don't have any issue with that sort of a disclosure.
But the problem is, it doesn't really matter because there are farms on Nantucket.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you have to notify someone that's buying your house, oh, by the way, there's a farm out in Cisco?
Well, I think besides that, it's the potential that you could have one as your neighbor.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I would think it would, whatever.
But ultimately, though, the part that we were most worried about is actually not. It's not an issue. It's what it comes down to is it's a very well thought out bylaw. There are the changes that FinCom decided to put in. If we want to put in that change where the caveat is that we get notified, ultimately it's still it doesn't affect our day-to-day
And you still have
operations.
State Law 111, Section 122.
Exactly.
Enforce it, and you have Article 70.
Exactly.
And I guess these other concerns are someone else's concerns, like the
Yeah.
real estate community.
I mean, if you have an issue with that, you might want to talk with your colleagues and bring it up at the meeting.
Well, I am definitely going to, tomorrow, while I'm going in my Monday morning, I will go see the president of the NARAD board
Mhm.
and make him aware of this.
Yeah, because the us as the health policy board, we've more or less addressed any of the fears we've had.
I love real estate, but we deal with health.
Yeah, we can't necessarily discuss the health. I mean, the real estate
No, no,
aspect of
I
it.
know. I mean, but
Mhm.
part of the real estate thing is making sure they check the septic system,
Mhm.
it has been checked, and so,
Mhm.
they do have an obligation as far as
Exactly.
the health.
Maybe it should be part of the closing dockets.
Mhm.
When you're in the room signing 100 things, and then the piece of paper comes in front of you.
But they want
That
this,
you know
they
you-
want this done before this, at the time of the purchase and sale agreement, when the guy's putting down the money, so. No, and I don't have anything wrong with it, just so, all I'm saying is, I want to make sure that the real estate businesses on the island are aware of that they have an
And-
obligation, that's all.
And to be honest, having spoken with the Agricultural Commission at one of their meetings, there's no malintent with any of that. So it's to use Miss Whelan's word. This is more of a hooray farming thing declaration by the town to say yes, there are farms on the island, there are incidental things that happen with that, and we're wanting you to know that before you buy that here. As far as the enforcement and any of that issues go, it doesn't affect. It doesn't negatively affect. As I do like your idea of having us be copied on it, so that we know that the complaints had happened.
I will propose an amendment and think of the words that if there's a complaint, you get a copy of it.
Yeah, we get a copy of the complaint, but it's as they are. They're well written.
Any other comments?
You might even be able to get the moderator to put it in as a technical amendment, so it
Yeah.
just happens automatically
I'm gonna
with
call it.
checklist there.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's, I don't want to stand up and call it and get everyone crazy.
Troublemaker.
You have comment?
Mhm.
Please.
You need a
Yeah.
microphone or can you
Yeah.
hear me okay?
Your microphone.
It's
'cause
for the
it's
TV.
recorded. Just
Hi,
identify
Tracy
yourself.
Pattenden, 4 Sunset Hill Lane, Nantucket. I'm also on the Ag Board. I'm here talking personally at this time. It's going to be a kind of a mix because, Mr. Cooper, you just brought up some points in regard to the document, which I don't have before me. This is identical to the state. We just, as an ag board, we just completely copied the entire document that was provided by the state of Massachusetts. So there's no changes in that. As far as personally, Roberto just said the spirit of it is so that we have an example on island, the MSPCA, which was sold to Offshore Animal Hospital. The neighborhood there is either suing or attempting to sue to get rid of the boarding facility because they don't like the dog noise. So this is to prevent those situations where you have a previous situation, i.e. a boarding facility and a veterinary hospital, and they also do doggy daycare there, and so that the neighbors cannot sue who came in after the fact.
Right.
So that's the intent, to protect the existing businesses, the existing people who have animals from lawsuits. It's kind of like if you buy a house next to the airport, you're going to get some noise. So it's that kind of
Right.
rule.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's the
Now,
intent.
we just want to discuss this before the town meeting because ultimately some issues may come to us. And I think we're comfortable with the warrant. We're just going to ask for one small amendment, which would be, and if there's a complaint and, that's going to the ag board, that Roberto gets a copy of it, that's all.
Right. You also had the nuisance law on your agenda. I don't know if you've spoken about,
Yes.
obviously I came in late, so.
Well, the nuisance law. Yeah.
Or a article for the warrant.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, Article 70.
See, we still have Article 70, and we still have state laws, so
right,
if you get crazy, we can still
right.
do enforcement. So
Just
we're comfortable.
for the record, I don't know if you guys even notified the people who wrote these warrants. I think they should have had an opportunity to be here to comment.
I did send out an email. I didn't receive any words out, though, or any response, though.
Okay.
So, but
I feel it's
I
just a
can-
little inappropriate to have a
Okay.
conversation without the people who wrote the warrant here.
Well,
That's my
Yeah.
opinion, but
Right,
that's,
I know.
Yeah, no,
it's just an opinion.
Public notice, yes, in the paper?
I believe so. Actually, I spoke with Lindsay. I sent her a message. I forgot her last name.
Yeah.
Picaz.
I meant specifically
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Wallace and Suzanne Gale, because they are the two people that wrote this. And I read about it because I follow the Board of Health online. So,
Yes, and I've already spoken with police about Article 70 as well, and they're in concurrence.
okay.
So it's.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, don't get me wrong, I didn't have anything against that thing about the real estate people in there. I just want to make sure that they get notified to know that they have an obligation to do that,
Yeah.
and I will take care of that.
Being on the Board of Ag, we've had many a conversation, and there's been back and forth going between town, Libby, and Sustainable, trying to figure out how does that actually get done? Is it something that goes out once a year? Whose obligation is it? Where do the fine? I mean, so we're, it's an issue that's trying to get worked out. I don't know how the state does it, but that would be another place to ask, is how do they handle it?
All right, thank you. So I think we're comfortable,
Mhm.
I'm all set.
and I thank you, and very helpful for us.
All right. Sounds good.
Any other issues people want to discuss? Nothing new? We will adjourn then if there's no objections.
Okay. We weren't trying to amend anything or anything. It was just to make sure we weren't in conflict with our own ways. We weren't misinterpreting.
Well, just the people that are